Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be covering the Ranger. So, if you think about a Ranger, what do you think of? Well, for me, I think of somebody who can use a bow for their primary means of dealing damage. They can use melee as a backup last-ditch alternative when they get their face punched in by by a foot fighter. But when I think about like Lord of the Rings or Dark and Darker or Dungeons and Dragons, sometimes they're Beastmasters, and a lot of times they're a spellcaster. They're what's considered a half caster, so they're not, fully dedicated into the art of magic, but they're generally doing utility spells, a little bit of healing here and there, the basics, right? Now, trying to take that archetype, that view, and put it into Mortal Online, gotta be honest, guys, was very difficult. Being able to make a character that kind of checks all those boxes, this build is not good. This build is not good. But don't stop watching yet, because I actually made more than one build. We've got the Advanced Ranger here as well. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the Fantasy Ranger and what that entails and how this character works, because I really wanted to try and make that archetype work for the people that wanted the closest thing to it. And then I'm going to talk about the Advanced Ranger for a little bit longer than that, and then eventually I'm going to go into the tier list. So let me go ahead and get started here. If you're ever curious and you do want these builds or any of my other build guides or build guides from the community as well, they're all located on mo2builds.com. If you're a new player and you're looking at this beginner build guide for the first time, you just found Mortal, one high recommendation is find a guild, and you can find guilds on mo2builds.com. You've got a whole bunch of different ones, and you can filter by language and archetypes and what their focus is, and like all of these other different cool filters. So check it out. Anyways, into the build guide. So this character is designed to check all of those boxes. It doesn't check them very well, but it does check all of those boxes. It has just enough strength here to use a dense crepite shortbow, which is the meta shortbow in the game, and you're really young and you have one slot of curite, so you're fast. You have a decent amount of mana at 147. Other hybrid characters like the Paladin or the Death Knight and stuff like, or other typical human archetypes that the other people play a lot of, they only have around 100 to 120 mana. So what you sacrifice in your health, going from like 180 down to 150, you pick up in your mana, which is nice. And one of the reasons we're more focused on mana, basically the way this character will play, is you're going to be a pseudo mage. You're going to be able to heal for 20 to 30 healing per cast, which is a decent amount of throughput because you actually have a respectable amount of mana. Your T-Lash hits for 45 to 56 as well, so you could cast 3 or 4 times with a damage spell before you go and that all of that kind of rolls into your stats, because having high intellect and high psych gives you a lot of additional action skills for these specific skills like taming and mental offense and all of the pet related stuff. Those all benefit from having good intelligence and good psyche. And when I'm min-maxing this character, trying to figure out how I'm going to fit all this shit into one character, you really kind of have to lean more towards the mage. So I went to the absolute minimum on the strength. Like we talked about before, Rangers only use their melee as like a last ditch. Holy shit, I don't have any other choice but to pull this out. Hopefully I can get through this. I did some damage with my bow before they gap closed me, right? So that's the typical archetype of a ranger in a lot of other games, like Dark and Darker, for example. So what does this character do? What does this play style look like? Well, you have everything you need to be a full Beastmaster. So you can have the most badass pets in the game, and that honestly will win you a lot of fights just because pets are overpowered. Having a Campodon with 1200 health that has a really good set of armor on it, or a white bear that has armor in the next patch, or a Mulva or whatever, having that stuff, having those heat-seeking torpedo damage dealing auto hitters, like, I can't sugarcoat it, guys. It's really good. Like, having pets is really good. Now, pets are very expendable and they die a lot and they're expensive. So take that into consideration if you really want to play a character like this. Or, you know, it's not just, when I say expensive, I don't mean just from a money perspective. You're going to spend a lot of time going to tame the pets if you don't have money. So you'll also need your taming up to level 100 to be able to tame combat pets. And like, you do not have the room in the build for that. So like, when I say that it's hard to fit all this into the character, I'm not kidding. There's like not much. So you've got just enough to use your dense crepite shortbow. I do not have enough to fit mounted archery in here. I got 23 points because you're human. It was very cheap to get a little bit of controlled riding and get the free 22 points that I get from being a human. So I went up to 35 riding just to unlock that, so that you have, like, if you're on horseback, you have a bow, you have a chance to use it effectively. It's not completely worthless, but really could not fit mounted archery into the build. I tried, guys. I tried to fit a lot of stuff in, couldn't fit it anywhere. So you have a very small amount of mounted archery. You're generally going to be on foot with your dense crepite shortbow, trying to put in damage before enemies gap close on you. If you have your pet, you use your pet to peel for yourself. You have curite, one thing of curite, because curite just got a fatty buff, and that makes you really fast. You're at 431 combat speed. The most common type of foot fighter in the game is a Alvaran foot fighter, a Dex foot fighter, or at least it used to be. It's probably human now, but they run at 440. They're the only thing that's really going to be consistently faster than you. So other foot fighters like Thursars and Ogmirs, they typically run around 420. So you can get away from the really scary guys that are going to kick your teeth in if they gap close on you by just running away. So that's nice. Like, you can kite decently with your bow. Now, just realize that if you're new to Mortal, right now, ground archery is not really a thing. Like, the most effective mounted or archery builds are mounted builds, mounted archer. There's a video on that already that I just put out, so you can check that out if you're interested in being a mounted archer. But it sucks because ground archery is not really a thing. Now, we do have a patch coming out soon. It's going to have weapon skills, and that's going to include the bow. Who knows if we're going to get rapid fire or like jump backs or like whatever. Think about other games. Who knows what we're going to get. Ground archery could totally be a thing, and this build could become a lot better in the near future. But right now, ground archery is not that good. So you run around with your bow, do as much damage as you can. If they gap close as a last-ditch effort, you pull out this one-handed sword, or you put in this tower shield, and that's going to soak some damage for you, and you fight it out. Now, if you don't want to run a tower shield, understandable. Just take the weight of this tower shield, which is like 10 kgs, and put it into your armor. You can run medium armor on this. You have 14 kg free armor weight. If you go up to that 14 kg area, you're going to only have 20% mana regeneration, which means your mana regen is going to be really low. What I would typically do is get like a horn scale silk full ranger set. Those are dirt cheap, so when you're new to the game, those are really good. Build a full set of ranger armor like that, and then toggle this tower shield on and off. If you're running really light armor like that, your mana regeneration is going to be around 80%. When you equip the tower shield, it'll go down to 20%. So if you're in the back line healing constantly, make sure that tower shield is off of your back, and then go from there. Another thing that applies to both of these builds here is because both of these builds are pet users, the profession skills are eaten up by those relevant zoologies. So Reptilia, Mammalia, and Avis cover the big three type of pets: your reptile pets, your mammals, and your terror birds. That's 25% of your overall profession points dedicated to just zoology. And the only thing zoology does is it makes them cheaper from a control perspective, so your pet point cost is lower, so you can actually control those big pets, and it makes you hit those type of pets or those type of creatures harder in the open world. So it makes you better for PvE unless you're fighting a Tamer and you happen to be fighting like a Campodon or something. You do more damage to the Campodon. But the big one is Mammalia. That should be in basically every single character's build because it makes you hit horses harder. And players ride horses a lot, and you got to kill horses a lot. So you're going to have the Mammalia at least, but getting those extra Avis and Reptilia and any other weird pets that you want, that eats up your profession skills really, really fast. So you're going to be really struggling here. Like I talked about already, this character is trying to do everything, but in Mortal Online, it was designed specifically so that you can't do everything. Because the game wants you to, the designers want you to rely on your teammates and your guildies to get this type of stuff done. So I'm trying to do everything, but I'm really not supposed to be able to. So this build's not that good. So I'm going to stop talking about the Fantasy Ranger. If you want it, you want to play that type of archetype, boom, it's right there on the screen. That's like the closest I could get to something like this. Now, the Advanced Ranger, I'll say, is probably a lot better. And what I've done here, more or less, is I've dropped archery entirely. Because archery got way more expensive than it used to be. So no more archery. And no more archery allowed me to put points into things I care about, like heavy armor training. My free armor went up by 4. So being able to put on medium armor and a tower shield makes your survivability a lot higher just in general. Being able to put a few points into mounted magery means if you're riding your horse, you can keep your horse up through sustained combat, or you can throw a heal here and there to help heal your pet from horseback, right? Having those points is nice. You're not going to be like a dedicated mounted mage, but you have half, so your heals are hitting for more or less 75% of what they would be if you were on foot, not counting the 1.5 increase in cast speed. So, whenever possible, don't be casting from horseback. It slows you down and it makes your heals hit for less. But you've got a lot more points in controlled riding now. So controlled riding, I'd actually lower that down and I'd bump the mounted magery so they match, but whatever. The screenshot's a little bit off. I'll fix it in the actual link. So your mounted magery is going to be at like 50, 60. Your controlled riding is going to be around there as well. That allows you to get swift riding, which means you have more endurance when you're traveling long distance, and it also means that other people can't chase you as well and you can get away from them. So that's all fine and dandy. But you're much more dedicated to foot fighting at this point. You've got better armor class. Your spears got all the way back up to 100. If you notice on this guy, his swords are at 50. And the reason I did that was because I'm really trying to min-max the points. And if you don't know how melee damage works in this game, just real quick, anytime you hit something, you have a damage window. So if you have, let's just say it's 1 to 100, you're going to do 1 damage all the way up to 100 damage. And if you have 0 points in it, 0 sword skill, and you hit somebody with a sword, you could hit for 1, you could hit for 100, you could hit for max damage if you're really lucky. The more points you have in a stat, the higher the floor is. So now my minimum damage is 30. So I'm at least hitting for 30, but I could still all the way hit up to 100. And let's say I have 100 points in something, like I have 100 points in spears here. That means my floor is even higher. So it's just going to increase your consistent or your average damage. It's never going to make you hit harder by having points in a stat. So that's why I pulled swords on the other build if you're going through it and you're like, what the fuck? So this build has spears now. Because I like to keep my distance, this build shouldn't really be gap closing or holding the line. It should be playing behind the front line. But spears is really good so you can reach out, poke people. You have a little bit more distance. Gap closing or gap creation is easier for you. If you want to min-max this build down the line, I would say drop these taming points and then put those into ecumenical. Because ecumenical is at 62. It's somewhere on here. Where the hell is ecumenical? There it is, 62. If you drop that, that'll get you near 100. Find a few more points elsewhere. Get that to 100. That's going to unlock Earthquake. Earthquake is really good on a Tamer because you can ride your horse or your Mulva straight into an enemy, Earthquake them off, and have your pet on attack so that as you're flying off, your pet is running towards the enemy to start hitting them before they even stand up. So that's really powerful, having ecumenical at 100. So that makes you better against horses, but this build does struggle at killing horses. You don't have a bow, You have a limited mana supply. If you have a ranged pet like these water lizards, they actually chunk horses. They have a long range spit, and they have a close range AoE spit, both of which hit extremely hard. They just ignore armor. So you can kill horses with these pets, and then you can also ride, next patch, you're going to be able to ride bears, but you got Mulvas and stuff like that. So one tip, if you're playing a tamer like this and you have a big pet, you can have bigger and better pets or higher level water lizards, like 2 of them, if you have a friend that you can ride on the back of their horse. So tamers really lend well to the team aspect of the game. It's much funner to be a tamer who has a friend that you can get on the back of their horse, because your pets are much bigger, and that benefits everybody, right? So, something to consider is if you have a friend that you can ride on the back of the horse, you're going to have a much better time. But you run Curite, Splinted Head, and Chest, and then a Light Ranger arms, and then a Calarian pants. The reason I really like this combination, you'll see me run it a lot, is the Curite torso has this like big skirt, this like armored skirt that covers the legs a lot. So unless you're really paying attention, the enemy's really paying attention, they're not going to notice that your legs are Calarian and they're the worst armor that you have. Occasionally you get hit in the legs, yeah. But it's not like you're naked and you're trying to hide your naked legs. You still have decent armor on down there. It's just lighter, so you have better mana regeneration with your shield off. So that's kind of the idea there. And then, if you know how the tower shields work, if you have a tower shield and you get hit in the tower shield, you take less damage based on the tower shield's defenses. You get what's called an equipment hit, and that damage is actually balanced off of the shield and your torso. So this torso is designed to have really high blunt protection, and the shield does not have good blunt protection, but it has good everything else. So you take the average of those, you kind of combine them, and it makes your when you get hit in the equipment much more tolerable, and you can take a lot more hits. But this build has 5% or 12% melee damage bonus. At least it's not negative. You could use one-handed swords or spears or one-handed basically anything. You could even use a dagger and probably hit pretty hard. So it's flexible. You don't have to use a spear, but you can use whatever you want. But the build is flexible. There are some benefits to this. Having a pet will carry you through a lot of fights. There's a lot of fights that you just kind of automatically win if you have a pet and you're not a complete idiot with them. People are getting better at fighting them. Out in the open world, if you're dragging a pet and you get caught by a mounted archer, that pet's basically dead. So there's downsides to it. Out in the open, you really struggle, but you go into a dungeon or you're fighting some ground fighting or like a huge Zerg fight and stuff like that, and there's multiple pets on your side, you're going to do well. Right, pets actually are really good at kill securing, especially in those mega big fights. If you have direwolves or something small that's not going to get hard focused, and the server's lagging for half the people there, those pets don't lag, and they just chop people up. But that's not reliable and not something that you should really focus on. It's just good to know that you have a lot of utility with those pets. So let's get into the tier list. Now, before I do this, I just want to go ahead and say thank you to the 3 new members I got on the channel. If you guys don't know, you can join as a member by clicking the join button next to subscribe, and the members get access to videos early. They also get access to member-specific videos and build reviews. If you do the higher tier, you can send me whatever build you have, and I'll pick it apart and go through it. And then also, huge shout out to the guys giving me super chats in the other videos, where you leave a little donation attached to your comment on YouTube. I really appreciate that. It helps keep the wife aggro down. But enough of me begging for money. Let's get into the tier list. I always say that I'm leaving PvP for last. Nothing has changed. I'm still going to do that. PvE though. PvE for the Ranger. Now, as I do this review, I'm reviewing the Advanced Ranger. I'm not reviewing the Fantasy Ranger. I'll just give you an overall for this. The Fantasy Ranger is like E tier at best. It's not good. This is not a good build. People will meme on me. They'll take screenshots of this and be like, "What are you thinking, Demo Man? You're an idiot." Yeah, this build kind of sucks. But if you really want to play that type of character, that's like the closest you can get. So I'm reviewing the Advanced Ranger here. I'll say this is B tier for PvE. It really depends on you having a good pet that can tank. So if you have like a bear with armor on, or a Mulva, or a Campodon, or a Terror Bird, or something that can take a couple hits and pump damage with you, there's a lot of mobs that you can just kind of cheese and level, and it's really, really efficient for leveling up. And being able to heal with that amount of mana, like you can do some decent PvE, especially when you're brand new to the game. It trivializes a lot of those fights and allows you to level up. And one big downside to this build is you really need all of this stuff for the build to come online. I mean, you don't need Tactician, you don't need your Warcry, but like Striker and all these other stat-related things, this build is so tight that you need those things. So you got to do a lot of leveling on this character. So having a pet for that, it's not bad. It's actually pretty good. Right? For solo play, so like you're just going out in the world playing by yourself, I'll say it's like B tier. You know, those pets make it, you're not really solo, you're like 1.5. That's kind of how I think of it. So there's like things you can do that you couldn't do as a true solo, just because you have a beefy ass pet. 1v1 and dueling. So there's a difference here. 1v1 is duel or fighting to the death. It's meeting somebody out in the open world, and how do you stack up against a bunch of other builds? I would say this is D tier. It's slightly below average. The biggest reason is you're going to struggle killing horses. You know, eventually if you min-max and get enough points for Earthquake, and you get that scroll in your book, which is expensive, and you carry those regs around, Earthquake is going to take almost all of your mana, so then you're going to have to rely on your pet and your melee, and hopefully you kill them before they can get back on their horse. So you're going to have a hard time killing anybody that's mounted. If it's a foot fighter, and you have a decent pet, you do a lot better. If your pet is dead, this build goes down like 2 tiers on everything. This build really sacrifices a lot of primary action skills to have a pet, specifically a powerful like Campadon or Bear or Mulva or something like that you can't have unless you have dedicated those points to it. So you lose 25% to 30% of your primary action skills if your pet is dead. It literally just becomes a dead stat in your build that does nothing for you. So something to keep in mind. 1vx. It's like D-ish. It's hard to say it's better than 1v1ing. It's probably about the same. Like you can, if you're a really good foot fighter, you know, and you're fighting a mage and a foot fighter, let's say you bump up into a mage and a foot fighter, you could put your pet on the mage, and he's either going to be screaming for peels the whole time and pull the foot fighter off of you, or you can kill the mage with your pet and then turtle long enough to survive so that you can pull the pet back and fight the foot fighter. Like, you have a chance. But it's really situation dependent. And one thing that I would really advise is don't ever drop blocking, because this build is really squishy. You don't have the best armor, you don't have defensive stance, you don't have all of that stuff. But if you, unless it's a blunt weapon, blocking blocks like 100% of the melee damage that's coming your way. And if it's blunt, it's still only doing like a small sliver of damage, like 2, 3, 5 damage max through blocking. So if you have a blocking skill, it's really actually pretty easy to parry up. That is what most people call it. It's just defending yourself without riposting, without counterattacking. Not that hard. What's hard in this game from a melee perspective is getting through somebody's defense. Because parrying and defending is so easy, getting through the defense is why you see the sweaties in Fab Town, or in the center of Fabridom, dueling all the time, doing the helicopter moves and the spinning and the feinting and the morphing. They have to do that because you have to get through somebody's defense, and defending is easy. With that in mind, if you drop blocking, you no longer have that defense option to you. So keep blocking on the build, don't dump it. You have the ability to parry up and survive, and you can use your pet as damage. So if you're not good at attacking with melee, this might be a decent build for you, because you don't have to get through somebody's defense. Your pet is doing that for you. You just need to keep yourself alive. And then you learn as you play the game. There's a lot of trial and error, and a lot, we'll talk about skill cap here for a second. there is some skill involved with pets with knowing when you should be doing what. So if your pet is attacking the person and that person is attacking you, you should have your weapon out. You should be parrying, right? But if they switch and they're on your pet, are we going to jump in and try to murder that person with your pet? Or are you going to start healing your pet, right? Situation really dictates, and it takes a while for you to learn that. So an S tier for skill cap would be like somebody that's really easy to get value from and learn. And this is like somebody that's extremely hard to get value from and learn. And I would say it's like B to A tier. We'll say it's probably A tier because your pets are really easy. It's like a one-hit button type of thing. And defending is easy. So it won't take you that long to kind of figure out when you should be doing what. But you're going to burn through a couple pets, and there is some learning curve to it. It's not like immediately obvious how you should be playing a Tamer. Dueling, though, I mean, you could put, I won't say it's like the worst thing in the world. You can go naked and have like a one-handed sword and like at least learn the fundamentals in town or with your friends. But yeah, you have so many different downsides and handicaps that you don't expect to be a good duelist on this. This is not really a dueling type of character. Offense. If you have a pet, again, I'd say it's B tier. It's like slightly above average. It's hard to argue with the action economy of a pet. They're just constantly attacking and chasing and doing damage and putting in additional damage that you wouldn't be able to do yourself, and taking those 250, let's say 250 primary points and putting them into other stats. What do you really get? You have a little bit more strength. You can get like aggressive stance for 5% more damage. Is your pet doing more than if you put those points in there? Probably. Yeah, if you have a high level pet, it's probably putting in more work than the point investment if you allocated it elsewhere. So I'd say it's like above average. It might even be between B and A, right? I wouldn't say it's A, but it's like B plus. So it's not bad. Defense, it's terrible. You have the ability to heal. You have the ability to run away from certain things. You can peel for yourself with your pet, which is pseudo reliable, right? If you have a Campodon, it's not too bad. Okay, I feel like I'm being really harsh there. I'll put it in E tier. It's not the worst thing in the world, right? But it is pretty damn bad. Team fights. It really depends on the team fight. If you're out in the open world, your pet's just going to get melted in the... Okay, so 2 main considerations. First is, are we in the open world? And am I the only one with pets? If I'm the only one with pets, my pet always gets focused first. If you don't have other tamers in your group, it's very easy for the enemy shot caller to say, kill the terror bird left side, and if there's only one terror bird, every single person on the enemy team knows what that is and where to find it. So your pet often gets melted at the beginning of a fight, especially if you guys get caught out. Now, if you're ambushing an enemy team, you know where they are, or you're waiting in a dungeon for them or something like that, then your pets become very powerful in team fights, because a good tamer will not bring the pet in until the mid-fight, because once the lines have touched and people are brawling and the chaos of combat has ensued, bringing a terror bird in from a flank and putting it on a healer that's in their back line, oh man, that kills people. That is powerful. That's how you play a tamer. So keep your pets out of view as best you can until the mid game, and if you can do that, it becomes very good. So situation dictates. In situations where your pets get value, this is like pretty high actually. This is like really high up here because you can heal. You have the flexibility to be able to both be healing and doing damage at the same time. Like your pet affords so much from an action economy standpoint, and most people don't think about that. That, you know, if I bring a Campodon with 1200 health and it's got armor on it, best case scenario, you've got a guy with a longbow shooting it for 30, 40, 50 damage or whatever, and it has 1200 health. How long does it take to shoot the longbow? It takes, what, 3-4 seconds? So you got one guy out of the fight for a minute, assuming nobody's healing the Campodon, and he's just railing it with headshots, and like in a totally unrealistic scenario, you take at least one enemy combatant out of the fight for a minute or two to deal with the pet. So now factor in that you're healing it and your team is healing it and we're talking and it's moving and they're not getting perfect damage on it. Like, you get a lot of action economy from the pet. They have to spend time and resources and equipment to kill it. So it's not like the worst thing. I'd say it's B tier, right? It's B tier for the team fighting. From a cost perspective, as a new player, this is going to be pretty damn expensive. Mostly because pets are expensive. Your actual kit isn't that bad, so I'll go just below. But like, you're going to spend a lot of time either going to get your pets and leveling up your taming and getting your equerries stocked up and spending time leveling your pets. Like, from a time investment to get your build online, it takes forever. So be prepared for that. Utility. Like, when I'm talking utility, oh, there's a difference between utility and uptime. I'd say utility, this is like C+, B-. We'll put it in B-. I'd say this build is just like a little, we'll put it C tier, guys. You're not a mage. You're a half caster, really. You have basic ecumenical. You don't have necro. You don't have elementalism. You don't have anything else that comes with elementalism. You can't even Akbond your pet. So your pet provides all of your utility. Other than that, you're not really good at killing horses. Man, damn. Now talking through it, I think it might even be D tier. We'll put it in D tier. Uptime. This is pretty bad, guys. We'll put it in F tier. And what do I mean by uptime? Now, with uptime, I'm talking about how often are you getting value from your action skills. So if I have all of my stuff dedicated to foot fighting, and I'm foot fighting, I'm getting value from almost my entire build. If I'm talking about this character and my pet dies, now 25% of my build is literally a dead stat until I go get a new pet. My magic skills are a dead stat when I'm foot fighting. When I'm casting, my foot fighting skills are dead stats. This build is really divided into thirds. So I'm getting value from 1 to 2/3 of my build max at a time if I have a pet. So there is always dead stats on this character. You're always operating at mediocre efficiency, if that makes sense. You're the master of nothing. Crafting. This is like one of the worst you could possibly have from a crafting perspective, because you have to have the zoologies built in as a tamer. So that sucks. And like we talked about earlier, you're trying to do everything. So you need pet armor, you need a melee weapon, you need to be able to craft your own unique weird armors, you want to be able to have a tower shield, you need your pets, so taming, you need all this other shit for your build before you even step out the gate. It's going to be tough, man. You're going to really need to rely on your guild to be able to keep your build functional. And you just don't have the primary points to do it. Even though you're a human, like, you still don't have the profession points, not primary, but profession points to make this really work. Fun. It really depends on the type of person you are. You know, if you like playing Hunter and WoW, you might have a lot more fun on this build than other people. Fun is subjective, so it's typically just my opinion, like a lot of this video, actually. But fun, I'd say it's middle of the road, right? When you get a lot of value from your pet, the funnest thing about this character is having a PvP fight where you guys win and your pet doesn't die. If you survive a PvP encounter and your pet doesn't die, it feels like a true victory. If you win a PvP encounter, but you had to sacrifice your pet to make that happen, it feels so fucking bad, man. It feels so bad. Pets in this game are broken. They're either completely overpowered or they're total garbage. There's no real in between, and they are way too consumable. There needs to be some reworks. I have opinions and ideas on how to do that, but I'm not going to go into it for this video. But yeah, So you're either running real high or you're running real low. So I'll put it right in the middle. PvP, same thing. Probably even a step down. If you have a pet, there are certain engagements that you auto win, which is unfortunately the truth. Other than that, you're mediocre at everything, master of none. Like, I don't have anything in S tier yet for this build. There's nothing that I think this is like the best of. So, something to consider. If I'm looking at all of this and where it all lines up, I think overall this is probably middle of the road, maybe even lower. Like, this build is kind of min-maxed with my game knowledge and my game sense taken into consideration, but I feel like a lot of players can kind of fall into a build like this without realizing it because they're just trying to do everything. So you're going to be very average, maybe even below average. So it's like a C-. It's like right here on the line. So we'll put it down there. It's really not the best at anything, guys, but it is cool. Like, if I was another category here for like cool, maybe that's in S tier. Because from a roleplay perspective and from a coolness factor, think Aragorn, Strider in the fucking prancing pony, like badass motherfucker smoking his pipe, like that kind of shit. Like, it's cool. It looks cool. Like, from the outside looking in, if you were just looking at the game, you'd be like, holy shit, that character's fucking badass, man. But no, it's really not once you learn what it actually entails, though. So anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you found this build valuable, throw me a super chat if you can. If not, that is okay. I still appreciate your time, your attention, and your patience. Have a good rest of your day.